On May 15th, the heads of state of the Organization of Turkic States meet in Turkestan, Kazakhstan for an informal summit on AI and digital development. The venue is symbolic. Turkestan is the spiritual capital of the Turkic world. But the political story is concrete. Over the past 4 years, the OTS has shifted from a cultural forum into a working organization. What we're seeing across the Turkic world is a level of regional integration without precedent in the post-Soviet space. So today we're asking, what can the OTS actually deliver? What's on the table at Turkestan? And where are the limits of this cooperation? I'm Bruce Pannier. I spent 4 decades covering the former Soviet Union. This is the Turan Research Center, hosted by the Yorktown Institute, where we break down the geopolitics of Turkey, Iran, the Caucasus, and Central Asia. If you're new here and want more analysis like this, please like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. And now, let's get into it. Joining me today, Rafael Sattarov, an independent analyst specializing in Central Asia and post-Soviet politics, and Andrei Kazantsev-Vaisman, a fellow at the Turan Research Center. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
My pleasure.
Let's start with the basics. The Turkestan Summit is informal, and the headline theme is AI and digital development. What is realistically achievable in 2 days, and what are you watching for as the marker of whether this summit was substantive or symbolic? And this one's for you, Mr. Kazantsev. Kazakhstan is the host. What does Tokayev personally want to walk away with? And what does the choice of Turkestan as a venue rather than Astana tell us about how he wants this summit framed?
Well, everyone knows that Turkestan is the cultural symbol of the Turkic world. It's a point where Turkish culture and Islamic culture united in the late Middle Ages. You have mentioned Ahmed Khaja Yasavi, a famous Sufi who lived there, and so on and so forth. So from Kazakhstan's point of view, summit in Turkestan is emphasizing something like a connection between deep history, very rich history of the Silk Road. You know that many innovations came to Europe through the Silk Road, and actually even some elements of algebra on which computer technologies of today are based also came from the Silk Road, and so on and so forth. So Kazakhstan is trying to emphasize the link between the past and the present, and the link in a very culturally rich place where AI meets classical Silk Road history, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, and Turkey are each building their own sovereign AI stacks. Kaz LLM and Alem LLM, an Azerbaijani prototype model, and Erdogan's call at Gabala for a Turkish LLM. What does meaningful Turkic cooperation on AI actually look like in that landscape? Where is the value added of coordinating versus competing? Let's go with Rafael.
Good. So AI area is very, very competitive area for every country. Nowadays, big powers like China, use the United States, United Arab Emirates, all of them trying to create their own AI project, trying to push investment in this area and creating database, etc., etc. But it's very wonderful, it's very beautiful when Kazakhstan or Azerbaijan or Turkey say, oh, we creating our AI. But for them alone, it would be very, very hard because Kazakhstan needs international cooperation, international allies for this AI cooperation or AI creativity, AI projects. Azerbaijan also needs allies and partners for this issue. Today, we see even big powers like the United States trying to build out kind of ally system on chip production and AI production. For example, we see how South Korea, Israel, and the United States. They created, let's say, cheap NATO. NATO for chip productions or for AI development. And too many AI giants, AI companies in the United States nowadays pushing too much amount of money to Israel educational system, universities, or building big campuses for South Korea. So Turkey, if these countries, Turkic Union, they say we're gonna build integration. It should be based on something, not only on military technologies, on Bayraktar or some super drones, but it should be based also on educational cooperation. It should be promoted educational cooperation between these countries, especially on digital area. Nowadays, they signed memorandum. All countries from Turkic Union, they signed such type of memorandum, but it should be implemented. After that, we can see real productivity between, after that, we can see real productivity, cooperation on AI. Without this cooperation, if Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Turkey wouldn't cooperate on AI production, alone them, they cannot success.
Okay, actually, that's perfect. That leads us into our next question, if I could, which is that
may I also add one point to Rafael?
Yeah, of course, please.
Rafael's speech, which I fully support. Actually, I would say that probably Kazakhstan is pragmatically interested in something like mutual investment. This is not mostly about like big LLM projects, because to a certain degree this niche is already occupied. But there is a huge opportunity for developing middle and small scale businesses with different mutual investments between Turkic countries or with participation of Turkic countries in the sphere which Rafael mentioned already, education, but not only that, for example, banking. Kazakhstan is a pioneer in many, even I can say, as compared to Israel or Europe, even to a certain degree, as compared to the United States, in application of AI in banking sphere and so on and so forth. I think that Kazakhs are more pragmatic. So building like new big LLM structures, it's more like Russian project or Chinese project. Kazakhs want something like business opportunity and investment, which they can process, for example, through their Astana business center. It has British law and a lot of offshore investments comes to Astana business center and so on and so forth. So I think that there is a space both for politically motivated cooperation and also for different business projects. And this is probably most interesting part of the story from my perspective.
Good. Well, we're leading right into the next question, which is that a common Turkic AI institute has been floated originally by Baku. Is this a serious project? Is this the kind of initiative that gets announced at summits and then quietly atrophies? Or what would you make of it? Is it real?
It could be real. It could be real. It depends how not only government enforcement, but also how private companies also would involve and would their trust on developing these projects, because for Azerbaijan declared very ambitious project, but it requires innovations. Innovations comes when private companies also involved, and educational cooperation with other countries. As I said, to achieve purpose of this project, which Azerbaijan declared, they need cooperation with other countries. Like they should create, for example, Erasmus program for digital education for IT education, or something common, educational students exchange program between Turkic unions, and creating something like, during the Soviet periods, it was called like Konstruktorskiy Bureau. It's construction bureau where industrialists and scholars, they sit and create something. They should create something like that, like construction bureau on AI, and to look for example, which capability is better, for example, suitable for Kazakhstan. Maybe Kazakhstan can help for building some databases, because databases requires too many waters, requires too much energy, and for example, it helps also to subsidize nuclear plant in Kazakhstan or in Uzbekistan, etc. Maybe Azerbaijan as a bridge between, for example, Turkey and other countries, and with Central Asia, and would be a educational hub between two, let's say, geographical worlds, and promote and push this project not only educational area, but also among private sectors. Without private sectors, without their enforcement, without their energy, let's say it would be just declaration, nothing more.
Okay, I have another question, and it's actually for both of you. I will start with Andrei, if you could give me an answer first. Kazakhstan's new AI law, the first comprehensive one in Central Asia, is now in force. Could it become a regional template, or are the political and regulatory cultures across OTS members too different for that?
Yes, I think it can become something like a regional template, because now we see a kind of competition developing between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. And in some ratings, Uzbekistan is already in some dimensions surpassing Kazakhstan from the point of view of introduction of AI technologies. This is the result of conscious efforts of Uzbek government to somehow compete with Kazakhstan. So I think, yes, Uzbekistan will follow Kazakhstan's track. And you know that in Kazakhstan, even the presidential address of the previous year was about introduction of AI in all possible spheres of life. So in Kazakhstan, it's a top priority. Uzbekistan is developing absolutely in the same direction. And if they start this type of competition, I think all other Turkic states would follow the suit.
Rafael?
Exactly. Competition is good, especially in this such type of competition, rather than military or geopolitically. I mean, without competition, we cannot see any innovations. But this competition, let's say, is not about rivalry between Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan or Azerbaijan. And of course, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, every country, let's say, in the world, they follow some tracks, and they adapt some tactical project into their own countries. It would be better when leaders of Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan sit in the table and say, let's create AI triangle between our countries. Let's mobilize our resource. Let's mobilize our effort for this, because we talk about cooperation, how Azerbaijan can contribute AI cooperation for Turkic Union. This cooperation requires this cooperation necessary for every country, because with AI, it's not just words. It's not just data centers. It requires cooperation on different area. It's educational area. It should be environmental area, very sensitive area for every country. It requires cooperation in the energy, etc., etc. That's why I think it would be better when leaders of three countries seriously sit in the table and say, let's create an AI triangle in Central Asia and mobilize our resources. Then we can see, very good results. Not only very, very wonderful results, because not only Central Asia and whole post-Soviet states are rich for very talent. There are too many smart people. They need investment. Only investment and mobilization come from state and private sectors. Without it, I think we cannot see. Right? I'm not pessimist. Let's say I'm very optimist, but it should take seriously by leaders. Leaders should take it seriously because it's very, very competitive area. It's not like, fashion word AI. It's not like kind of summit or big conference with drinking wine and making photo for Instagram. It's very competitive area. Every country is now catching talented people from different countries and create their own AI technologies, AI projects. That's why Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, they should not only compete with each other, but should unite their energies, unite their powers.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There's a growing argument that the OTS is now being driven by Baku, Astana, and increasingly Tashkent, more than by Ankara. Do you both agree with that read? And if so, what's changed? A lot of people give credit to Erdogan and Turkey for initiating the reformed Organization of Turkic States and making it into a power. So who's driving it now, as you see it? Is it all of them? Is one of them pushing harder than the other? Are there any leaders within the OTS at the moment? I'll start with you, Andrei.
Okay, I would partially agree with this statement, but I think that to a certain degree, OTS is now even more than before an organization of networking. So I think that all four states that you have mentioned, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, and Turkey, they are all now playing an important role in this organization. And so this is even more networking organization than organization with a clear leader. I can give a background what has changed, because in the 1990s, Turkey was considered like a leader, a natural leader of the Turkic world. And this was not only economic influence of Turkey, economic leadership of Turkey in the group of Turkic nations, its military leadership, and so on and so forth. It was also ideological role, identity role, because Turkey was considered like a model of secular pro-Western development in the 1990s. Something like an alternative to the pathway that was taken by Iran or Afghanistan. So development of extremist ideology and religious state and so on and so forth. And at that time, Turkey was much more democratic than today. And much more pro-Western, pro-European, pro-American also. The situation changed in 2000s. At that time, Turkey was still considered as a leader in the Turkic integration process. But at the same time, mostly it was driven by Turkey's soft power. And for example, some prominent Sufi leaders, Gülen, for example, played a very significant role in that. Even now, in many Central Asian countries, we have many important people who are from Gülen system. They are well connected to each other and so on and so forth. His system still has a significant influence on education everywhere in Central Asia, and so on and so forth. But everyone knows that Gülen and Erdogan became enemies later, and Erdogan himself did a lot in order to destroy everything that Gülen did. So partially Turkey has lost some significant elements of its soft power. Economically, Turkey is still a leader by GDP per head, but Kazakhstan is quickly approaching it. And also, I mean that hyperinflation in Turkey and so on and so forth, this is not very attractive for other Turkic nations. And in many respects, Central Asian leaders today develop their own foreign policy, which is still multi-vector, but the significance of many vectors in their policy is increasing. They are still having very good relations with Europe and with some countries, for example, with France and so on and so forth. They're even strengthening these relations today, for example, Kazakhstan. Also, they still have strong relations with China, with Russia, and Turkic vector is one of these vectors of influence, vectors of multi-vector foreign policy. And why they have started to develop so many vectors today? Because we are living in a very uncertain world. And the more connections you have, the more stable situation you will maintain in your region. Central Asian integration, not only Turkey, but with participation of Tajikistan is also, and Turkmenistan is also one of the options. So not only Turkic option is possible. I mean, in this direction, with participation of nearly the same group of the countries, probably with Azerbaijan also, who was included in Central Asian 5 group recently. So what is changing? The world is changing, and in this uncertain world, networking becomes so important, and Organization of Turkic States is very important from this point of view, just from the point of view of networking.
Central Asian countries started to see differently to Turkic Union or organization or Turkic integration, and Ankara today is involved much more to Mediterranean issue on maritime border issue with Turkey, with Israel, with Cyprus, and more concerned about issue in Middle East. So here is pioneers on that issue: Azerbaijan, Astana, and Uzbekistan. Because for Central Asian countries, it's kind of reserve airport, diplomatically reserved airport for their foreign policy. They started to look differently. Now they tried to keep more foreign policy independence from Moscow and increase cooperation regional level, let's say, on multi-vector level on Turkish pan-Turkic issue, because today we can see how Azerbaijan also started to be kind of one of the Central Asian countries, like on every regional level discussion now include also Azerbaijan, and the Central Asian countries recognize Azerbaijan as kind of much more close country to their region. And that's why it's true that Ankara, Astana, Tashkent, and Baku kind of play a bigger role in Organization Turkic Union than even Turkey today. Because for Erdogan, it's much more for political game on inside electoral level, when he needs to build coalition with MHP party leader Devlet Bahçeli. After that, for him, it's secondary issue if it not include military technology providing or something else. Because previously I said Turkey's geopolitical energy, power, ambitions much more focused on Europe and Middle East rather than to Central Asia.
Okay, thank you. Rafael, where does Uzbekistan really sit in this picture? I mean, Mirziyoyev has been ambitious, proposing intelligence chief meetings, 2030 strategy, mediating in the region. But is Tashkent actually ready to operate at the level of Baku or Astana? Or is there a gap between the ambition and the capacity? I mean, Uzbekistan was kind of isolationist there for a while, but and not really a team player until after Karimov died. So where is Uzbekistan today?
Well, Uzbekistan involved, let's say first, because during Karimov period, Uzbekistan were very, very, let's say, suspicious not only towards Turkey's geopolitical agendas, but also Russians. And even in regional level, in Central Asia, Karimov preferred bilateral relationship rather than multilateral relationship with neighboring countries. He wasn't happy with Erdogan. Between them wasn't, let's say, warm relationship. It was too much suspicious because Uzbekistan was personalistic autocratic regime during that time and remain, of course, still. But Erdogan government gave platforms for Karimov critics, and Uzbekistan tried to minimize any participation, multi-vectoral cooperation in Turkic Union, especially on projects which promoted Turkey. It's changed because today Uzbekistan sees differently and prefers regional cooperation. And we should understand it's not only Uzbekistan's number one agenda, but also Kazakhstan's. In foreign policy, they prefer regional cooperation. Cooperation with other countries and powers is secondary issue. But Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan doctrinally declared that their main agenda, foreign policy agenda, is rebuilt regional cooperation. Because when we talk about too much about Turkic unions, we forget about Tajikistan, and Tajikistan feels kind of isolated. Some Uzbek diplomats, non-officially, say sometimes they had to explain to Tajik partners, like, don't worry, like, we're not trying to isolate or to put you out of regional agenda. We still, like, remain in our work, and we prefer regional cooperation. Today, Uzbekistan tries to push its own agenda, but why Uzbekistan involved to this Turkic Union project, especially upgraded relationship with Azerbaijan and Turkey? Because today Uzbekistan, I mean, especially Uzbek political elite, they feel that they are in blockade, in transport blockade. All their efforts to develop transport projects to Afghanistan, Pakistan, to Pakistani ports. They try to develop transport projects through Afghanistan, Iran, to take through Bandarabad, but Iran under sanction. Nowadays, there is going war, and all their transport projects gone. I mean, non-effectively. The Uzbek government didn't take any benefit from them.
Okay, thank you. And also thank you for pointing out the difficult transit and import-export situation with Uzbekistan. Yeah, of course, because we have to remember that, as Uzbek officials have reminded for more than 3 decades, Uzbekistan is one of only 2 double landlocked countries in the world, so they certainly are in an unenviable position as far as imports and exports go. Let's move on. Looking past this summit to the regular summit in Turkey in the fall, into the centenary of the 1926 Baku Turkology Congress. What's the trajectory? Where do you see this organization in 5 years? We'll start with you, Andrei.
I think that we already have something like a clear outline of development of different Turkic organizations, different forms of Turkic integration from the 1990s until now. And so it is very clear that they will develop in the same direction in which this cooperation has developed until now. So it will be, of course, economic cooperation. By the way, the trade has grown between Turkic countries significantly over the last years. Mutual investment, transportation projects, especially everything connected to the middle corridor through Zangezur. Also cultural cooperation, although one should understand that cultural cooperation, Turkic cooperation, goes against the background of growing internationalization. So, for example, in Kazakh university, you have 3 languages in which people speak, so in which students are taught. These are Kazakh, Russian, and English. Probably the role of English will be significantly increased, even more than the role of other Turkic languages. And this is going on not only in Kazakhstan, but also in Uzbekistan. The number of English-speaking students is growing very quickly. So I think that Turkic development of Turkic cultural cooperation will be going on in the context of internationalization. So it will not go in the direction of everybody studying Turkish, as some people thought in the 1990s. No, even Turkish alphabet was not accepted as universal. But there will be still very many different projects, and all these projects will go against this larger picture of internationalization. So I do not think that it will be institutionalized like EU, for example, or like NATO, or like CSTO, or like Shanghai Cooperation, even like Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It will be still something like a multi-vector club of networking powers which cooperate between each other, increase their potential through this type of cooperation. This looks very much like the activity of non-alignment movement, actually, to a certain degree in the period of the First Cold War. If today what we have can be called something like a second Cold War. Thank you.
Okay. I'm conscious of our time. We do have to move along here a little bit. So, Rafael, on Northern Cyprus, on Israel, on the broader strategic compass, Ankara and the 3 post-Soviet drivers have moved in different directions. The Kabbalah Declaration papered over those tensions. Can the OTS continue to hold them, or do they eventually have to be resolved one way or the other?
It's very difficult issue for Central Asian countries because today what we see, yes, it's yesterday news, Erdogan and his party introduced a law which allows to Turkey to newly produce energy projects in eastern side of Cyprus, eastern part of Mediterranean area, and try to change maritime border with Greece, and it is escalation. This issue between Turkey, France, and Greece, and Cyprus. So Turkey would push and try to legitimize Northern Cyprus in Organization of Turkic countries because Turkey has interest to develop energy projects in this area. They have ambition. Their interest, Turkey interest, contradicts with Greece, Israel, Cyprus, other Mediterranean countries, and Turkey doesn't have allies on that issue in regional level. So even today, Syria, it's very, very hard to believe that
Syria would support Turkey on that issue. I think Syria would keep neutrality. So, without any doubt, Erdogan would try to legitimize Northern Cyprus in Turkic Union and try to push recognize independence from one or two countries from Central Asia. It would help to a little bit legitimize for Turkish energy companies to work over there. And let's say about future, if we see about 5 years, I would compare this platform with Francophone Union, which promoted France and some French-speaking African countries, more cooperation, more educational, humanitarian area, sometimes energy and sometimes military, but everything is limited. Every country keeps their independence on foreign policy, because it dictates geography. Without any doubt, Turkey would concentrate its own power mostly towards Europe or Middle East, and Central Asia would remain secondary issue for Turkey. That's why Azerbaijan playing over there kind of key role, kind of keeping together two worlds, Turkey and Central Asia, introduce successful projects. They're learning from each other. For example, Uzbek government, before introducing new constitution, there was no any word about secularity, like laicism, secular principles in constitution. They kind of learned Azerbaijani constitution, Azerbaijani system, and introduced it. Something they learned from Kazakhstan, or Kazakhstan, something learned from Azerbaijan or Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan. I mean, they're learning mostly, not competitive. So in 5 years, I would be so much optimistic. It would remain as a francophone type of cooperation between these countries. Ambitions of Kazakhstan would be different after 5 years, or Uzbekistan. They need to enrich their international cooperation with other countries, not to put all eggs in one project.
If I could, I really, Rafael, again, I'm conscious of our time. If I could get you to briefly comment, you've commented on North Cyprus. What about Israel? I mean, the Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Kazakhstan's a signatory to the Abraham Accords. Azerbaijan and Israel have really great ties. Could you give me just a brief comment about how divisive this is between Turkey and the three Central Asians? I mean, is this a problem going forward, looking 5 years into the future?
It would be a problem if Israel wouldn't work diplomatically and wouldn't work with promoting its own soft power with region. But I wouldn't be so pessimistic, because still Uzbekistan doesn't have any interest to have negative relationship with Israel. Of course, it declares two-state solution, but kind of enemy, kind of negative attitude toward Israel, Uzbekistan doesn't have. Like mostly population, despite online propaganda, despite online emotionally working about this ongoing war in Middle East, people in Uzbekistan still keep neutrality on this issue. I think it's very important. We're not negative attitudes toward Israel or positive, but neutrality, it's okay. I think you can start something new from this position.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Andrei, Russian commentary on the OTS has shifted from dismissive to alarmist. Talk of a proxy NATO, a Turkic sultanate, even a Turan army. How much of this is genuine Kremlin anxiety, and how much is rhetorical positioning for domestic audiences? And does it constrain what Central Asian governments feel they can do at Turkestan?
Actually, I am doing Central Asian studies for more than 30 years, and I remember different periods from the point of view of what Russian press was talking about. And I think that there were periods of very negative description of everything Turkish, everything connected to Turkic integration. And I don't see any specific hostility towards Turkic integration in Russia today. Generally, yes, it was very negative description, but I don't think that taking into account that Turkic integration is going on along, as I said previously, non-alignment principle, actually. So yes, Turkey is a member of NATO, but Turkey is even more today very specific, so to say, member of NATO, not only in relation to Israel, but also in relation to many other issues. So all other states are basically neutral from the point of view of the conflict between Russia and the EU, for example, Russia and the West generally. And as long as they stay such, I think that all the crises between Russia and these states can, in principle, be solved. So there is some hostility, yes, in Russian press and in Russian expertise, yes, but I don't think there will be major crisis.
Okay, great. Thank you. The Putin apology to Aliyev last year was striking. Has the underlying dynamic between Russia and the OTS members fundamentally shifted, or was that a situational concession that doesn't translate to Central Asia? Rafael, start with you.
I think it's translated to Central Asia because when Aliyev demanded apology from Putin and compensation and turned his airplane when he was flying to Moscow, it was kind of gave motivation, not say political elite, but intellectual elite in Central Asia, especially in Uzbekistan. And they said, we hope sooner or later our president also, with Russian president also, would stay like Aliyev. It was kind of was motivational, let's say, influence to Uzbek intellectual people. And journalists, mostly political public analysts, they all kind of applauded for Aliyev for this, not only in Uzbekistan, but also in Kazakhstan or other countries in Central Asia. They applauded for Aliyev this stance, and it was shown that reality in South Caucasus drastically changed. And nowadays, Russia isn't the main game player in South Caucasus, and Russia cannot talk with Azerbaijan or with Armenian head of state like it was 2000s, when he was like he could put mentor attitude towards post-Soviet leaders. It influences, mostly say emotionally, it influences. And something would happen also between Central Asian leaders and Russian leader sooner or later. I mean, because it's kind of symbolic event which shows that Azerbaijan is different. Azerbaijan is not anymore typical post-Soviet state. And previously said like about Turkey, like all benefits about this Turkic Union getting Turkey and Erdogan, which is not fair. But Turkey has much more integrated academically institutions to Western institutions or media. That's why Turkey are much better on sharing our agenda among international media, expertise, etc. But
mainly this integration is tactful on the part of Azerbaijani President Ali, who could build personal relationship with Uzbek leaders, with Turkmen leaders, despite having problem with Turkmenistan on issue Kaspi. But and we could see Azerbaijani effort much better to keep Central Asian countries and unite these countries on that issue, because Azerbaijan, despite being close, too much close to Turkey, linguistically, culturally, militarily, but Azerbaijan mostly post-Soviet countries, I mean, like Central Asian countries, they came from the same family, even not a good family. So Azerbaijan understands language of Central Asian and explain like Turkey's efforts, because they say for Turkey, pan-Turkic issue is a secondary. It's not mainstream political issue inside political life Turkey, but it's mainstream issue in Azerbaijan. It's mainstream issue now becoming in Kazakhstan and now becoming in Uzbekistan. But still, it's not mainstream issue in Turkey.
Let's talk a little bit about military cooperation for a minute, if we could. Aliyah floated the first joint OTS military exercises at Kabbalah. The Unity 2025 exercises happened in Samarkand outside the OTS framework. And in June, several Central Asian militaries will be in the United States for CENTCOM's Exercise Regional Cooperation 2026. Is the OTS actually moving toward a security identity, or is the real action happening in other formats? Andrei?
I think that Organization of Turkic States in the foreseeable future will never become a military organization or an organization with substantial military element. What you have described is just a good example of multi-vector foreign policy and multi-vector military cooperation. So Central Asian states will, to a certain degree, will cooperate with other Turkic states, like Azerbaijan and Turkey. They will cooperate between themselves in the format of Central Asia, probably Central Asia Plus with Azerbaijan. They will cooperate in different formats with different non-regional powers like United States, and so on and so forth. They will cooperate still with Russia for probably for some years at least. I do not know for a long term, but for sure, if you ask me for 5 years, I think they will continue military cooperation with Russia through CSTO. They have military bases of Russia on their territory and so on and so forth, especially Kyrgyzstan, for example. Also, they have some type of military cooperation with China, not only through Shanghai Cooperation Organization, but also bilaterally. So you see many different directions of cooperation. Turkic direction is not dominant from this point of view. And I do not foresee some real hard military cooperation through the Turkic format. So it can be a development of anti-terrorist cooperation. It can be some type of soft security. It can be peacekeeping, something like that. Probably peacekeeping can develop, especially in the context of different crises in the Middle East and so on and so forth, probably. But I do not think that it will turn into something like NATO or CSTO today, even Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Still, no one is interested in that in Central Asia, as far as I see it.
Rafael, can you, we'll leave the last word with you. Can you give us your brief response to the same question?
Yes, it's too much exaggeration, I think, when some columnists say about creation potentially about Turans or Turkic NATO, but I think it's too much exaggeration because we can see how cooperation, military cooperation between Azerbaijan and Turkey was built. Still, despite Azerbaijan connected too much military education with Turkish military educations, but still Azerbaijan keeps Soviet or Russian aircrafts in its army, still use Russian military technologies, and it also not only Turkish Bayraktar, but also Israeli military technologies were successfully implemented into Azerbaijani army. So Azerbaijan showed that Azerbaijani example. It shows that Azerbaijan wasn't part of whole Turkish military system. Even it integrated, Azerbaijan has our independence. Azerbaijan keeps different type of military standards for its own army. So, yeah, military cooperation without any doubt would increase, and Turkey not only providing military drones, but also financing to produce it in Uzbekistan or in Kazakhstan. But I think not military cooperation, but cooperation between security services, police services would increase definitely much higher than military integration, because these government organs are play a key role in political life, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, or Azerbaijan, or even in Turkey today. So I think not military integration, but high-level cooperation between security services and police on counter-terrorism issue, on narco-traffic issue, or let's say maybe some sensitive political issue, such type of cooperation would increase rather than military.
Absolutely fantastic. Gentlemen, thank you so much. And a reminder for our audience that we have been speaking with Rafael Sattarov, an independent analyst specializing in Central Asia and post-Soviet politics, and Andrei Kazantsev-Vaisman, a fellow at the Turan Research Center. Thanks to you both for being on the program. And also another reminder to our audience, if you want more analysis like this, please like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for being with us.